On the night Bunny died, the podcast trio received a message, "Get out of the building." The person who sent that message appears to go to extreme lengths to get the matchbook found in the secret passageway, implying they went to lunch with Bunny and picked up the matchbook at the Pickle Diner. The person seen in episode 6, wearing a mask and a backpack, walking up to a trash can. Who is this character? Let's assume the show has an economy of character and the masked person is someone we already have met. Who could this character be? They'd need to know the podcast trio's phone numbers to send them the text message. They'd need to know about the secret passageways in order to drop the matchbox there. A name that keeps coming up on the podcast but not on the show is Oscar. Oscar would have the phone numbers of the podcast trio. With his dad as super of the Arconia, he'd know about the secret passageway. By texting "get out of the building," we might assume that the person was trying to help the podcast three. If you were gonna bring back Oscar, now's the perfect time since Alice and Mabel are having issues. It also matches the way Oscar was introduced in season 1. As a mysterious figure stalking Mabel, here there's another mysterious figure stalking Mabel. Why wouldn't it be Oscar? Well, Oscar's name has only really been mentioned in one episode this season, in very tossed-off way. And if Oscar knew about the secret passageways, why didn't he mention them during the Tim Kono case? Who is this suspect?
Let's solve Only Murders in the Building, Season 2, Episode 6, Performance Review. We'll be breaking down each episode for clues, suspects, and red herrings on our hunt to learn who killed Bunny Folger, who framed Mabel, Charles, and Oliver for Bunny's murder, why was Bunny in Mabel's apartment on the night she died, who's moving the Rose Cooper painting, what became of the Rose Cooper painting, the real one, who did Bunny have lunch with at the Pickle Diner, who poisoned Winnie, why is the police department not investigating the Tim Kono coroner's report? Oggity, there are too many questions. Spoilers for the first season of Only Murders in the Building and the first 6 episodes of Season 2.
If you haven't seen all 16 episodes, pause the video, watch the first 6 episodes of Season 2, or else you might get locked up, and not in a sexy way. Let's look at the double C, the credit clues for Episode 6. In the opening credits, the Easter egg appears to be the moon turning into a glitter bomb. You go, Mariah. The closing credits show us the matchbook and the Frida painting that we saw in episode 1 of season 2.
Listeners, it takes me about 6.5 to 7.5 hours each week to review the episode, pull these screenshots, zoom in on things, put together your theories, your clues. This week, I only have 2 hours to do it, so I'm really gonna need you to give me the clues, point out the things that I missed, tell me the theories you have, anything in this episode 6 or the previous episodes that we've missed in our hunt to find Bunny Folger's killer. I need your help. I'm just on a time crunch this week. Why am I on a time crunch this week? Well, I've got to go to the House of the Dragon world premiere in Hollywood. That's right. You do some mildly popular Game of Thrones podcasts, and suddenly you're invited to the world premiere from HBO and Warner Brothers. So I'll be there, and I've got less time to work on this podcast. So please, I need your help. I titled this, Let's Solve Only Murders in the Building, because it's a group effort. I certainly can't do it all by myself. You may not care about Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon, but I'll be putting out a special podcast on our trip to Hollywood and our attendance of that premiere. And I was thinking one thing about Game of Thrones that may tie in slightly to Only Murders in the Building is on Game of Thrones, the fans were always fan casting actors who they knew might appear on the show, suggesting actors to play certain roles. And a couple of times, the fan cast actually turned out to be the one that the show actually cast. Star Wars, that's true too. Fans kept saying Rosario Dawson should play the part of Ahsoka. And sure enough, they cast her. Jay and I were talking back and forth in the YouTube comments, and we were thinking, well, what characters have we not seen in Only Murders in the Building who might appear, and should we come up with some fan cast ideas for them? So we were talking about, hey, Lucy's mom, Charles's ex. Who would that be? And so Jay wrote, the name that I think of is Toni Collette. Toni Collette would be a great Lucy's mom. Then Matt piped in on the YouTube comments and said, what about Melora Hardin, who played Jan on the US version of The Office? That would be so meta. Oh, man. Hey, I was trying to put my head around this. Who would be a great actress to play the role of Lucy's mom on Only Murders in the Building? They have to be old enough to be dating Charles, a man in his 70s, but young enough to have given birth to a young woman like Lucy. I was thinking they could go really big Hollywood with Julia Roberts maybe, or Nicole Kidman. And then I thought, well, maybe not that big. Maybe you go Elizabeth Hurley, Laura Dern, Marissa Tomei. And then I thought, boy, this show loves comedians. What comedian would be good to play Lucy's mom? Is Amy Poehler too young? Could she do it? What about Sherry O'Terry? And then I came across my dream person, Julia Louis-Dreyfus. I think she'd be perfect as Lucy's mom and Charles's ex. Hey, what about Mabel's aunt? We haven't seen her yet. Any ideas who could play that? Maybe Eva Longoria. Maybe Cristela Alonso. Who do you guys think? Let's fan cast these parts that haven't come up yet. I say this every week, but if you're listening on the podcast app like Apple Podcast or Spotify or something like that, we need you to subscribe and leave a written review. On YouTube, I need you to hit that like button and give us those comments. And somebody actually left a comment saying, this idiot host begs for likes too much. Let me say, I hate begging people to give likes and subscribe and to leave comments. But YouTube, podcast apps, a lot of times you'll only show up in the search results if you have 1 million likes, 1 million comments, 1 million subscribers. And so when people search only Murders in the Building, I want them to find our little community here. So I'm going to say it one more time. Please hit that like button, leave a comment. If you're on a podcast app, subscribe, leave a written review. It helps me so much, and it helps other people join the hunt to find Bunny's killer. This may sound silly, but I actually feel terrible that I have less time to work on this podcast and less time to hunt down the clues for everybody. So I thought to make it up to you guys, after I read your feedback, I'll end the podcast by going over to my bookshelf and recommending some great fair play murder mysteries where you can read a great novel and have all the clues and be able to solve it by the end. So that's at the end of the podcast. We'll go over to my bookshelf and we'll look at some great fair play murder mysteries. Before we dive into the suspects, let's run down what episode 6 taught us about our victim, Arconia Board President Bunny Folger. And we didn't learn too much about Bunny in this episode, so let's go to some feedback. Danny wrote, "The theme of this season is family. Whoever killed Bunny was in some way a part of her family. Maybe a child or a grandchild that she disowned. That's why she says the person she had lunch with was not her friend." Bacon Quiche 74 wrote, "Bunny's parrot, Miss Gambolini. It might be an anagram where if you spin it around some, it might be able to spell M. Mora sibling." Oh boy. Now let's look at the suspects, and I'm going to put them here, but I don't really suspect Cinda Canning, Poppy, Cinda 2, or anybody from Team Cinda Canning. Now we know from Ursula that these podcasters are sniffing around the building looking for dirt. Poppy gets treated terribly by Cinda. She's even taken a few staplers to the face. Now Poppy does a couple of suspicious things in this episode, including taking a couple of large bags out of Bunny's apartment. It could be audio equipment, but it sure is suspicious. Poppy also wears, you guessed it, let's say it all together, boots. If we can trust Poppy, Cinda is a liar. We know Poppy can't be the masked glitter person because she was on the phone with Mabel. Of course, that does raise the question. How did Poppy have Mabel's phone number? Did Cinda get the podcast trio's phone number when they came to visit her in season 1? Jan. Again, she's not the killer, but she did get a couple of great lines in this episode, including when she asked Charles, "Okay, I tried to kill you. How many times are you going to make me apologize for that?" Brilliant. Ivan the waiter. Now, Ivan wasn't in this episode, but we had this bit of feedback from Vivian, who wrote, "Anyone else think it's strange that Bunny's waiter knew her address?" Vivian, let's think about that. She's been going there 7 years, so she might say, "Yes, I live in the Arconia." And maybe once he gets to the Arconia, he could find out Bunny's address from Lester or maybe a sign on the door. But it is suspicious because we suspect the glitter bomb victim was the person who had lunch with Bunny. It's unlikely it's Ivan because he wouldn't have been the person who had lunch with Bunny the day before she died. The super fans, and specifically really we're talking about Marv. When we look at the person in the secret passageway who Lucy saw, we mentioned before that they were wearing booties. Would Marv have to wear something over his shoes when getting rid of mold? Could Marv be the glitter bomb victim? Well, I suppose there's a chance he could have gotten their phone numbers when he met the trio in season 1. Howard, another episode Howard wasn't in, or was he? It's unlikely that Howard was the person who had lunch with Bunny at the Pickle Diner.
Wouldn't she have mentioned it at her retirement party? I think it's reasonable to assume, though, that maybe Howard would have the podcast trio's phone numbers because he's on the Arconia board. Theo Dimas, another person who wasn't in this episode. But let's look at Theo, mainly because I think he fits the build of this person pretty well. Theo could have known about the secret passageways. He's lived in the Arconia. But if Theo knew about the secret passageways, why would he need to steal a key from Lester the doorman? Bunny knows sign language, so Theo could have been the person who had lunch with Bunny. How would Theo get the podcast trio's phone numbers? That's a bit trickier. Certainly his dad might have had Oliver's. There's one piece of Theo that wouldn't fit, and that is that Theo is unlikely to be the person who called Bunny and asked about the painting. So it's possible the caller asking about the painting was not the person who she had lunch with the day before. Oliver's son, Will. Now, I always try to be honest, I've never really suspected Will. But if you're going to look at Will as a suspect, he always does, once a season, come up with, hey, Dad, look at this evidence. And in this episode, he was the one saying, hey, Dad, look at this video of Mabel attacking somebody on the subway. Now, Will and Oliver went to the Pickle Diner the day Bunny died and ran into Bunny. She mentioned when Will was a kid, he broke a window, but she said nothing about having lunch with him there the day before. Alice Banks. We got a bit of feedback about Alice where Beatrice wrote, Alice, on top of the Son of Sam card in her bag, had a box of tissues, and the killer sneezed. Ding, 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 ding. Well, Beatrice, what do you think about this episode? Because it seems highly unlikely that Alice could have switched out of her Mabel costume back into the masked person costume with the glitter on it and get to the subway station before Mabel got there. I'm not saying it rules it out entirely, but it does seem unlikely. In this episode, you knew it was going to happen. I knew it was going to happen. Alice made a turn. She's been taking pictures of the apartment and getting close to Mabel so she can recreate it for an art show. Is Alice such a good artist that she can do a great recreation of the mural from Mabel's wall? What other paintings has Alice had to recreate? This seems terrible. Mabel's trust issues are gonna blow up like a Mariah. I know a lot of viewers might be really down on Alice, and we probably should be down on Alice, but is there any way Alice in her mind could think this was a positive thing for Mabel, a way to get her over her trauma? Lucy. Lucy's in the episode, but to me, she doesn't really have many clues as to her being a suspect. Lucy is still trying to be a part of Charles's life now, a bit like Jan said the killer would try to be. Lucy can't have been the person who texted the podcast trio because we see her with the podcast trio when they receive a text in the first part of this episode. Sazz is back. Loved the scene of Sazz breaking up with Jan as Charles. Loved it. I've never thought Sazz is a suspect. This is the first time she's really appeared in the suspect list. I'm doing it because a lot of people in the comments love to point out that Bunny says savage as she dies, possibly implying that she thought Charles was the killer. Of course, she could have seen Sazz and thought Sazz was Charles. I don't see any other clues for Sazz, but hey, who knows? Joy! Everybody who loves comedy should watch Andrea Martin, the actress who plays Joy, with Martin Short in the classic television show SCTV, Second City TV, after the Second City Theater Company. So funny, so great. It's wonderful that she's on this show. Charles has a type, doesn't he? He went from 3-letter Jan to possibly 3-letter JOY. Let's get to the big three. Oliver, he's had it rough, and he gets a DNA test in this episode. Did he lose his son and his dips in one day? Swan Brick Hat wrote, in the episode where the trio discover Bunny's private elevator, Mabel grabs 3 fur coats from Bunny's closet and hands them out to the podcast trio. In episode 3, the last day of Bunny Folger, we see Bunny wearing a fur coat that looks like the same one Oliver was wearing. More importantly, Bunny is shown taking a call from someone who wants her painting, and she puts her cell phone back into her fur coat pocket. If she left her phone in the coat pocket, is it possible that it's in there and that it's wherever Oliver put the fur coat once he was done with it? Would he be able to find that phone and find out the number of the art thief? Charles, or as we like to call him, Uncle B. He wants his soup. This seems to be the end of his relationship with Jan. We keep focusing when he's on Brazzos of him wearing a wig. Did the killer wear a wig to look like Charles? That would clear Sazz of any implication. Bloody Mabel. Mabel is having it real tough, and she doesn't like talking about her dad. She also really doesn't talk about her aunt too much either. In Mabel's past, she worked at Long John Silver's. The Crispies and the Hush Puppies. This one's got a little bone in it. Jimmy Russo got a little touchy. Mabel claims it was an accident. As a side note, Long John Silver's had a meat cutter? That seems unlikely. Oh well, anyway. The one thing about Mabel is she starts blacking out in the art gallery like she did when she found Bunny. We got a bit of feedback that we'll go over later about Mabel and past trauma. There really were very few specific clues I found in this episode. If you haven't already, please go back and watch or listen to our previous podcast where we review all the clues from all the previous episodes. Every episode of Only Murders in the Building, we have a podcast on the clues within it. Something we also haven't done in a while is we haven't talked about the Rose Cooper painting and the history behind it with Charles's father. When was the last time that stuff came up? Is it possible that the painting is a second story this season? For example, the way Zoe's death was a second story to Tim Kono's death in season 1. Last week, we had our grand unifying theory about Howard. Which character should we make our next grand unifying theory about? Marv, Theo, Lucy? Which one do you want us to put the spotlight on and do a grand unifying theory about? Send us your feedback at DoublePHQ on Twitter and Instagram. And hey, I got some great feedback at the last minute on Instagram this week. Love it. Facebook.com/DoublePHQ. You can go to our website, doublepmedia.com, as well as send us an email to hello@doublepmedia.com. And finally, if you're on YouTube, I said it before, we need the likes as a group. We need all of your comments. Please subscribe. It helps us so much.
Let's get to the best part of every podcast, your feedback. We got an email from Gabriella who wrote, after episode 5, I'm left with more questions than answers. In episode 3, when Bunny is sitting in the courtyard with Nina, we notice a man who is slightly out of focus in the background. He has a dark knitted cap, dark work boots, and who appears to be speaking on a cell phone. He's got a drink of some sort. We notice the same man appear to sneeze towards his right hand, the one with the beverage in it. Remember, while Bunny and Nina are speaking in the courtyard, she warns Nina about 2 tenants, and one of them is seemingly the guy who just sneezed, Mark. Bunny tells Nina that Mark is a liar. So that's one point Gabriella brings up. Another one is she says about Mabel. In the first season, Mabel speaks of the same recurring dream. She seems to sort of mentally black out and not remember certain details, like when she found the fatally injured Bunny in her apartment. Does that imply that when Mabel was a kid, some masked creeper stalker came in through the secret passageway in her aunt's closet while she and her aunt slept there? Does Mabel block out part of her memory of Bunny dying in the apartment because the masked killer reminds her of a creeper from her recurring dreams? Mabel and Lucy both appear to have some kind of childhood trauma that occurred in the building that they are suppressing. Mabel says in her recurring dream nightmare the guy is wearing a mask. BT Dubs, love your podcast. Thank you, Gabriella. Those are really good points. And you remember in season 1, I focused maybe too much on Mabel. On YouTube, Dave wrote, if Marv is the killer, maybe 14, or what Mabel heard as 14, is actually for Tim Kono. Love that idea, Dave. Sandy had another possibility. Is it possible that Bunny said floor screen passage rather than 14 Savage? Floor screen passage symbolizes the one in Mabel's closet. Kim wrote, the whole show has been about failed relationships. Charles and Jan, Charles and his girlfriend, Sazz and Charles's girlfriend, Oliver and his wife, Mabel and Oscar, Tim and Jan, Theo and Teddy, Teddy and Oscar's wife, Charles's father and Bunny's mother, Charles's father and Rose Cooper, Lucy and the 5 stepfathers. There isn't one stable relationship. Howard is lonely, Dr. Grover Stanley is desperate for customers, Tim was desperate, Uma is bitter. The only relationship that has lasted is Bunny and her parrot, Miss Gambolini. Makes me want to binge Dateline just to avoid ending up on Dateline. Bunny was the only person that managed to figure out what was important to her, so they killed her. This is like Mayberry RFD. The only married person was the town drunk. Whoa, a Mayberry RFD reference. Kim, great job. Jay wrote, Ivan told Bunny that he heard from the previous day's server that Bunny had been there with the quote-unquote friend. I wonder, couldn't someone just ask the other server to describe the person Bunny was with? Jay, that makes too much sense. Tiffany wrote, your unifying theory of Howard being the killer doesn't work because Bunny died in Mabel's arms. That's not enough time for Howard to faint or set up knitting needles. Well, Tiffany, I think that's true, The one trick is we really don't know how long it was after Bunny was stabbed and when Mabel came down from the rooftop. She was on the rooftop long enough to at least down one bottle of champagne. Sandra wrote, Howard fits just as Jan said he tries 2 times to get close to the podcast trio. Sandra also points out that it always stays with me when the podcast trio said showing up at a memorial is a classic guilty person move. And who was there? Well, Howard was there. Last year they gave us a crucial clue in episode 2, and then they distracted us with a side mystery. Ooh, Sandra, are they repeating season 1 again? Susan Mary wrote, I have a couple of questions about Howard being the killer. If he passed out at the blood, why are his glasses intact? Also, is Howard physically fit enough to climb the ladders in the pathway? And this last part isn't Howard related. We only have Lenora's word that the painting is a forgery. Maybe Lenora is only saying that to get it back easier. JT wrote, cool theory about Howard, whom I have not suspected before because I did not see a motive. However, if he did find Evelyn's leg in Charles's freezer, that could give him a motive. If that's the case, he could be working with Alice, as we now know is a pickpocket. She had to steal a blonde card to fool Oliver. Alice's gallery is called the Third Arm Gallery, but as a group, they could be known as the Third Arm Collective, TAC. You spelled TAC backwards? What do you have? CAT. Oh, JD, here we go. Vefa wrote, since I don't want Howard to be the killer either, I think we can also look at it in this way. Remember that Jan is pointing Howard as a suspect. Why did she want to get the intention off the Dimases? Does Jan know something about the Dimases? Maybe about Oliver? When they were the main suspects in that episode in season 1, why was she trying to pin it off the Dimases onto Howard without any evidence while the Dimases looked pretty guilty? Great questions, Vefa. Peggy raised a question. She said, could the duplicate painting fit through the secret passage entrance in Charles's apartment, the little one through the bathroom? Or would the size of the painting make somebody have to come through the front door? Who could get through the front door? Well, Peggy notes we have seen Theo steal the master key from the front desk, but she doesn't think it's Theo. Peggy still thinks Lucy is the one who stabbed Bunny with the knitting needle, but she thinks there's got to be one other person. Peggy also says that she thinks Ivan is Bunny's son, whom she gave up at birth and tracked down later in life in order to be his silent benefactor. Perhaps when Bunny gave away Ivan as a child, she realized that she had nothing left and focused her energy on the Arconia. Natalie noted that in the video of the diner, there's a lot of focus on the person Bunny was speaking with at her table. But if you look at the waitress in the background, she looks like she picked something up off the floor, then gestures at people in another booth. Is it possible she has a clue? There is so much more feedback. I can't get to it all, but I want you guys to know I read it all and I try to throw as much as I can in the podcast. Please keep giving us those likes on YouTube and those comments on YouTube. Email us hello@doublepmedia.com. You can give us comments on Twitter and Instagram @doublepHQ, as well as Facebook, facebook.com/doublepHQ. And now, you know what? Let's step away from the podcast area and go to my bookshelf and talk about some great fair play murder mysteries. So we're going to be talking about a bunch of mysteries. We'll see how many are good and how many are fair play. Let's get to it. Okay, right here at the top, we have the Thursday Murder Club and we have The Appeal. These are both kind of comical murder mysteries. I personally think The Appeal is a better read, and it actually has clues, so you can solve The Appeal by Janice Hollett, while this one's just funny. I don't know if you can solve the Thursday Murder Club. Carl Hyacin, a lot of fun, very fun detective books, but I don't think they actually have murder mysteries you can solve in them. We've got the 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. That has been described as Groundhog Day, where you keep reliving the murder day and seeing new clues. Of course, it's not just Groundhog's Day, it's Quantum Leap, because the detective can leap into different bodies of people at the crime scene. And I solved this one, but still kind of tricky. Devil in the Dark Water, good read, but not a great murder mystery. I always say that I read all the Agatha Christie novels when I was a kid, but only have 3. Three have survived all my moves. Look at this, even this After the Funeral. I've got such an old edition, it's called Funerals Are Fatal. I think that's a pretty fun one. A lot of people say Five Little Pigs is one of her best. I'm a Murder of Roger Ackroyd and Then There Were None fan. I think those two are her best. that one's still pretty good. Posture and a Fate, people say, is some of her worst. What else we got here? Let's hide behind all these Crichtons. We got any murder mysteries in there? No, I don't think. Here, anything? Any murder mysteries? Nah. Yeah, those aren't murder mysteries so much. Okay, let's come down here. Ooh, Robert Goddard. Boy, you want to talk about great twisty stories, but you can't really solve these. So let's push these. Oh, hold on. Here we go. So these are Golden Age detective stories by Richard Hull, The Murder of My Aunt, and Murder Isn't Easy. These are both, once again, maybe not solvable so much as, but they are fun, hilarious, classic detective stories. This is a good series right here. This is the Flavia De Luca series about a little girl in post-war England solving murder mysteries. So those are pretty fun. Here, let's move some of these books around. P.D. James, people love P.D. James. I've read a couple. I read this, Shroud for a Nightingale, and Devices and Desires. Both pretty good. Tana French, as we all know, he writes a great murder mystery, but in my opinion, In the Woods is the best. This one is really tricky. We covered on Double P Podcast, we covered The Dublin Murders, which was an adaptation of this book, In the Woods, and a couple others. But yeah, this one really good. This one really good. I didn't solve this one. Real tricky. Let's go. Yeah, okay. Not the greatest murder mystery there. More classic murder mysteries. We have Ellis Peters, One Corpse Too Many. That's a famous one. Another classic, Brian Flynn, The Mystery of Peacock's Eye. People who love classic murder mysteries, that's a good one. These you'll hear me sing the high praises on. This is Magpie Murders and Moonflower Murders. Now, I said a lot last season that Magpie Murders was going to be our next Let's Solve version of the podcast, but it hasn't yet been released here in America. It's been released months ago in every other country of the world, but not yet here in America. This is a great one. This is a great one. All these books have two kind of mysteries involved. I solved one. I didn't solve the other. So good. This is the sequel, Moonflower Murders, almost as great. The reason why I say it's not as good as Magpie Murders is I did solve both the mysteries, murder mysteries in Moonflower Murders. But boy, you love murder mysteries. These two by Anthony Horowitz, so good. These are some other books he's written, not as great as that. Oh, here's another great author. Oh, so good murder mysteries. A High Mortality of Doves and Dead Man's Lane by Kate Ellis. This High Mortality of Doves, I think, is the better murder mystery of those two. This one, An Unwanted Guest. I wasn't so crazy about that. Okay, these Cemetery of Lost books, novels are both great. Shadow of the Wind, so good, but not really a murder mystery. Let's see if I have any others. Let's see, anywhere else? Let me think. Come on. Oh, Kate Atkinson. Those are detective novels. These great Kate Atkinson's books. Great detective novels, not murder mysteries. What else? That's nonfiction. What else we got? Anything else in here? Oh, this is going to be a new movie starring Brad Pitt. Should be a really good movie. Oh, God. Hilarious book. So many good books. Somebody who reads a lot of great murder mysteries, that may be the last ones that really line up as perfect murder mysteries. So, okay, once again, I'm just going to go back to Anthony Horowitz. These are modern books, really fun. Magpie Murders and Moonflower Murders. Read them. You'll have a great time. And I'll talk to everybody next week.